Hi everyone, my name is Dre and you're welcome to Phloshop channel. Today we're actually doing a Euphoria inspired look. It's a beauty shot and we have our model Della here, we have our photographer which is Phloshop, and we have our hairstylist Liz who doesn't want to come and say hi.
Hi.
Liz, would you? Liz? Hi Liz.
Hi.
Okay, so you guys,
I want us to grow some more. I think we can make it to 6,000 by the end of the year, so let's make it happen. In order to show support for the channel, please remember to leave a like and a comment. That's a way of letting me get to see you. If you're shy, you can just say hi. You guys went over the target mark for our previous video, but I want to be cool and still keep our target for this video at 100 likes, so don't forget to hit the like button right now. Let's get into today's video. So what I'm going to do for this particular video is just show you guys the behind the scenes and also give you a run through or a breakdown of my editing process. So at the end of the behind the scenes video that you guys are going to watch, I'm also going to go through Photoshop layer by layer or folder by folder, however I grouped it, and show you everything that I did to move the image from the raw to what you saw on the thumbnail. So because we're working in a very small space, I decided not to use my trigger. I rather put a flash on my camera, set my strobe to slave mode so that when the flash fires, it's gonna pick up that signal or that flash, and the main strobe is also gonna trigger. The setup was simple. I used a very big deep parabolic. I did an unboxing of that particular one, so I'm gonna put it in the card just in case you want to check that out. And I put a white reflector underneath to bounce that light to fill up the shadows from underneath. I'm also using the white because I didn't want it to be too strong. The makeup artist didn't go for a very dewy look, so I didn't want to add that much specularity by using the silver side. I just wanted to keep the contrast in the image, but then just add up to the catch lights that would exist in her eyes. I used my Canon EOS R with my 100mm f2.8 non-L macro lens. I set my aperture to about 5.6 and my shutter speed to 1/160 and my ISO at 125. Alright, so at a point I swapped the very big deep parabolic octa for the small one, and that's because I just wanted to get a bit more contrast in the images. I noticed the big parabolic was just making everything look a little bit flat, and I wanted some contrast, especially since the skin wasn't dewy. I felt the contrast was what was going to make the image pop a lot, so I swapped for the smaller one just to help with that. So in a few minutes, I'm going to be walking you guys through the editing process. You can watch the rest of the behind the scenes, and I'll see you there. Opened inside Photoshop, I'm going to hide all the layers that are currently active, and so we're going to start from the beginning. So this particular layer, which is the background layer, is the image that I got straight. Not necessarily, I think I made some adjustments in Bridge, so hold on, let me just go to that before we continue. I have done a lot of cropping, so I'm just gonna undo the crop and just quickly show you the actual frame that I started with. This is the actual frame that I started with. This is how the image turned out. It was really underexposed, and that's because I wanted to lift up or bring up the information to the level that I really wanted, and that's the reason why I underexposed it. I knew that I was going to push it a lot in post, so I wanted to preserve it in camera, and then in editing I can choose how far I want to push the highlights. It's also because the makeup artist didn't go for a dewy look. I just wanted to have control over how much highlight was going to be present in the image when I'm done. So the first thing I did, which I always do if you've seen my editing videos, is I did a lot of skin healing. So if I zoom in a little bit more, I just wanted to be able to see all the healing that I did. This is before the healing. You can see there were some strands of hair on her face, and some of their baby hair that she has on her forehead, some of them showing through, and some of these blemishes on her skin, and her eyes had a little bit of blemishes in there as well, so I had to clean all those things up. So I didn't do the eyes in the base healing because I was going to do that later on. So inside the base healing, all I did was, you'd see a lot of layers here. I did a lot of healing of the textures and the hair, and here I fixed just a little bit. There's a couple around the hair area. I'm sure I did some cloning there. That's why it's on a separate layer. Right before I did some healing of the hair as well. So I grouped everything into this and called it base healing. So you'd see all the healing is on that layer. The next layer is my first frequency separation, where I mostly use to correct just a little bit of the tones, and I grouped it, converted it into a smart object, just so when I'm running my second frequency separation action, it wouldn't get affected. So this is the next frequency separation, which you'd notice I have reduced the texture. Like if you look in this area, for example, where the mouse is pointing, here's a before and after. You can see I've reduced the texture a little bit. So if you don't know how I did that, I have a video which is just before this one. I'm going to put it in the card and in the description in case you want to check it out. You can see why I do 2 frequency separations. So the next thing after that is my extra healing. So this is where I painted in to remove some of the blemishes in her eyes, and just to make it look a little bit cleaner. If I zoom into this eye, for example, I took away some of the spots that I missed in her eyelash inside the eyes. I also painted some of the marks out. So from here, the next thing I did was dodge and burn, and that just added a little bit more shape or enhanced the shape that she already had. So that was what I was supposed to do, the dodge and burn. I didn't do too much, again, because I wanted to control the highlights to the point where I felt was okay. So the next thing I did was add a lot of contrast, and I call this contrast boost. But inside the curve, if I quickly show you, it's just a slight dip in the shadow area and a slight bump in the highlights. And you'd notice the highlights on her nose are popping just a little bit, and then the shadows and the midtones are looking darker. A normal contrast curve is going to add a lot of saturation, so I changed the blending mode from normal to luminosity. So what I did was preserve the contrast and reduce any saturation that would occur from such contrast. But the desaturation was not enough, so the next thing I did was to desaturate the image, and what I did was just to put a black and white adjustment layer on top of the contrast and just set the opacity to about 60%. If I drag it all the way to 100%, you notice it's just a black and white adjustment layer where I reduce the reds to -21 and reduce the yellows a little bit, but bringing it down to 6% is just taking out enough of the saturation that I need. So here's a before and after. I see it just sucks out some of the color out of the image. So the next thing I did was run my Phloshop melanin action. Now this is an action that I did for dark skin, because when I'm shooting with my Canon camera, I always have a lot of reds and yellows dominating the image. So I created this action, which is free actually. I'm also going to put a link in the description, and I'm going to put it in the card so you can check it out. It's an entire video. I show you how to use the action. It's very flexible. If I go inside, you'd see I have a black and white in there, photo filter, curves, but I'm not going to go over this because I have a dedicated video on that, and so you can check it out in the description or in the card above. So the next thing I did was I called this purple blush vibrance. What I did was just increase the vibrance in the purple. You'd see the blush area here, for example. I felt it wasn't popping as much, so I just increased it using a hue saturation. So what I did was use this target icon clicked on there and then it selected the magentas for me, and I boosted that to 17, but I still manually went into the reds and boosted the reds a lot. So this is without the reds. This is how it looks, and by moving the reds all the way to 25, this is how it looks. So here's a before and after, before and after. That's quite strong inside. What you notice is the mask isn't a clear white mask, and so it's a black mask which is hiding the effect and then just revealing it in the areas. And where I painted are, if I press Alt and click on the mask, you can see I painted on the cheek area. Wherever the purple color was, I just painted over that just to boost it a little bit. The next thing I did was what I call a highlight pop. This is just a curve that is set to screen, and I used the blend if option just to choose the amount. If I double click on that, you'd see I dragged it all the way to this point and split it, and so it took out all of the shadows and then just boosted the highlights for me. The next thing I did was just add a general vibrance just to bring the warmth back into his skin, and I added a noise layer, obviously just to add a little bit more noise to the image. I like noise nowadays, so you'll be seeing me using a lot of noise in my images. But what makes the image pop actually is the lens flares, and I went to Google and just looked for lens flare on black backgrounds, and I got a couple of them. It's actually the same thing. If I hide it temporarily, you'd see that if I reveal this one, it's just one lens flare. If I click on that layer, you see I set it to screen, and that is why the black isn't showing. If I change it to normal, this is how it looks like, right? But because it's on a black background, when I change it from normal to screen, anything that is black becomes invisible and just the light shows. So when I did that, I made another copy and brought it to the lower lip right here, and I felt I didn't want it to look repetitive, so I just created another one, flipped it, and then created a cross on top of the lip. Now my last folder is just called face and neck tone, and what that does is just match the hue difference between the face and the neck, and that's the final step. So inside that folder, what I have are quite a number of layers. So inside the first one, I have a hue saturation. So what I did was, I think I targeted a certain color, which obviously would be reds, and I desaturated the reds, and I painted just around her neck. If I press Alt and click on the layer mask, you notice I painted just around the neck area. So what that does is it's just pulling out all of the reds in the neck and desaturating it. My next curve is a normal curve, but also targeting the RGB, for example, is targeting the entire image. So I just brought it down and darkened the image and just painted that exactly where the face is. And that is just darkening the face to the point that looks like it's blending with the neck. And then with the layer mask, I painted white to reveal it where I wanted. So if I press Alt and click on that, you notice the entire skin is painted in white, but her eyebrow and her eyes and lips are masked out, and so that effect is not affecting the eyes, the lips, or the brows. So you notice there's a vibrance which is clipped down onto that particular layer, and what that does is I boosted the vibrance and boosted the saturation. So before the boost, this is how it looks like. After the boost, this is how it's just a little bit of a pump or push to the colors. Alright, the next thing I did was create a curve, and inside the curve I went into my reds and I boosted the reds again. I went into the greens, did nothing, went into the blues, and then just took out a little bit of the blue just to add again warmth to the image. And so when I do it before and after, all that does is just add a little bit of boost in the color of the image, and that's basically all I did to move the image from this to this. If you enjoyed the video, do leave a like. Let me know what you think about this particular video. Do you want me to be combining behind the scenes and editing videos like this alongside dedicated editing videos that I'll be creating for the channel as well? Do let me know in the comments down below, and yeah, leave a like just to let me know or feel your presence on this channel. Again, I'm very grateful for you guys passing my target of 100 likes on my previous video. I hope we can do the same thing for this particular video, and thanks a lot once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.